everyone. Welcome to Empowering Exceptional Minds, the podcast diving into neurodiversity through real conversations with parents, individuals, and professionals on challenges, strengths, and unique experiences. I'm your host, Maayan Glazer-Koren, an educational therapist, ADHD educator, and ASD specialist. At Educational Therapy LLC, my private practice, we support kids and adults with executive function and learning differences toward confidence and independence. This podcast is a collaboration with Wiz Therapy, connecting individuals to providers and streamlining services for neurodiverse communities. Our goal is to share strategies, stories, and insights to empower families, educators, and professionals. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast or Wiz Therapy. The conversations here are for information and empowerment, not a substitute for professional or medical advice. And most importantly, if you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please dial 911 immediately, or you can text 741-741 to reach the crisis text line in the US for support. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of Empowering Exceptional Minds. Today, we're going to talk about writing. I'm excited about it. I do love to read, and I do like to write. And I have to say that some people are having really hard time with writing because it's not an easy task. And we're going to have Rochelle Melander. She is an ADHD-trained certified professional coach and the best-selling author of several books, including Level Up, Quest to Master Mindset, Overcome Procrastination and Increase Productivity, and the award-winning children's book, Mightier Than the Sword, Rebels, Reformers, and Revolutionaries, who changed the world through writing. Through her writing and coaching, Rochelle Melander helps writers, creatives, and entrepreneurs overcome distractions and procrastination, design a writing life, turn their ideas into books, and navigate the publishing world. She is the founder of Dream Keepers, a writing workshop that supports young people in finding their voice and sharing their stories. We want to hear your voices and stories. You can visit her online at rightnowcoach.com. Rochelle, did I miss anything?
No, you got everything. Thank you.
With my amazing accent?
Yes, I love it.
You know, there is a word that I always kind of having hard with, like say it. It's which word is it? I always have challenges with this one. So I will work on it more. But it just shows you that none of us is perfect. Like
Right.
the word entrepreneur is a very hard word for me to say sometimes. Okay, so welcome aboard. That was my spiel. Sorry, sidetracking. Please tell us to our readers, where are you? How did you become a writing and ADHD coach? This is really interesting thing to do together.
Yeah, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is a big city on one of the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan. And I started as a regular life coach. So I started coaching leaders and people around wellness. And I did that for many years, but at the same time, I was writing books. And as time went on, people started asking me, well, could you help us with our books? And so I developed the writing coaching from that. And then I've always loved working with kids. So at the same time, I was coaching and developing my writing coaching business. And even before I started writing coaching, I was creating writing workshops for young people. Mostly, I started with a group of teen girls in the inner city of Milwaukee, and I would bring them mentor texts. So Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech or Nina Simone's Young, Gifted, and Black. And I would have them kind of write their own versions. Um, and so those two parts of my life, the young teaching young people writing, and I did training with the National Writing Project. They do a whole summer program for teachers. And I wiggled my way into there, even though I wasn't a real teacher, and took a 4-week class with them. But doing that, working with young people, and then also working with adults, just just fed together really nicely. And then later, like around right before the pandemic, a colleague of mine did a presentation on her work as an ADHD coach. And I said, huh, the stuff you do is stuff I've been doing for myself and my clients for many years, but I never would have thought of it as ADHD because it was all for, I don't know, I think it was mostly for me as a very distracted um, person. And then for my clients who, you know, after I studied it, I realized, oh, this is executive function disorder. This isn't just, you know, being late or being disorganized. This is just the challenge of thinking through in your head all the pieces of a book or how you're going to attack your day. Um, so all of those things came together. I did a whole coaching program on ADHD coaching to help me understand what I'd been doing kind of on my own for years. So I hope that answers your question a little bit, at least catches us up to today.
Yeah, I just want to kind of also sharpen this a little bit because when we work with clients, many of our clients can like have no issues with syntax or like they write beautifully. The issue when it comes with the writing piece, it's like you said, it's the part of the executive functioning. How do I organize my language to produce? And what do I do when I'm stuck?
Mm,
I have many clients who get stuck, you know, even on just starting the essay or the
mm,
writing, or even stuck in the conclusion piece. Sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, I just wrote all of this. How do I continue from here? How do I
yeah,
finish strong, right? Like the what I wrote with the conclusion. Um, so it's definitely things that go hand in hand with that. And also having the understanding that writing is a process
yeah.
and we need time, right, to do that.
That's yeah, that I think that's so when I work with young people and when I've done my residencies in classrooms, the challenge is we don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this real push to get things done quickly. And I don't think that helps anybody, you know, and I don't, I mean, I think that any young person put under a time constraint is going to struggle, whether they have ADHD or not. It just feels more challenging. And I mean, I think that the traditional writing education can be very linear,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think most of us think that way.
It's
Um,
rigid. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I struggle a lot. I mean, I struggle a lot with working on a like a Word document or a Google document where everything is very linear and you can't like be thinking of, you can't see everything at once. And so I work with my students in creating mind maps to kind of help them visually um, organize their thoughts.
Yeah, I do the same. um, so how do you work with young students who dislike writing?
So, you know, I have a real benefit in that I am not usually a tutor. Usually I am there as either an artist resident in a school or an artist resident at Dream Keepers at the library. And so my goal is creative play. And even so even though what we're doing is something that's a little bit of a combination between making art and writing, the young people, you know, it's their choice to be there, and they will often choose not to, or just at least express their disinterest because, oh, I hate writing, I'm not good at it. Can't I do something else? And so it helps. First of all, it helps that I remind them we're just playing. You know, this isn't for school. And even when I'm in an artist residency, I try to explain we're just playing, we're just learning, we're just expressing ourselves. Then I also try to use a framework because I think it's helpful for young people to have a framework. I think if you tell a kid just do whatever you want, they don't necessarily know like where to start because they don't have a lot of experience. But if I give them a structure like we're going to draw cartoons about and then some ideas, or if we talk about writing a haiku poem, and then I explain kind of what it is. The other thing that always helps is if the young person can write about something they're interested in. So if it can come from whatever it is, like I had one child who knew everything about cats, and so she wrote a little book about cats.
Hmm.
Because why let all that good information go to waste? Um, and other kids, know about snakes or swordfish or whatever, and they want to create about that. And then I always have a few students who feel so anxious about their writing, and then I see for good reason because their parents come by and want to correct their grammar. So I say, why don't you start with a cartoon? Why don't you start by drawing out your story and at least get it down in some way, and then we can add the words and we can work on that together. Um, so those are some of the things that I use. I feel like any good experience a child can have with writing is going to go with them into the future.
Yeah, I agree with me. I'm listening to you talk about this, and with my line of work, I do a lot of support with working memory and reading comprehension and writing. And one of the things that I do is that I go into that creativity piece also with like sketch notes. I'm like, okay, so you need, even if it's for something for school, let's say they have to do something with social studies.
Mm,
Okay, so you need to do something about the Constitution. How are you going to draw a picture of this president talking with this person about that, right? So kind of make it more fun and
mm,
creative than just boring. And also because, picture worth 100 words, right? So it's, and for our kids that are very visual, are very creative and outside of a box thinker, we have to go with this approach. And this is something also that works when we sit in these IEPs or 504s and just helping the team understand, this kiddo, it's will be beneficial for them to go from drawing to the text. So we want to them to draw a picture and then text.
mm,
Like, when they were in kindergarten, they would, or first grade, they have like, oh, draw a picture of what you do this weekend. What did you do this weekend? Which is a very open-ended question. On the other hand, they just need to draw. And then in first grade, we say, okay, we're going to label it, right? So now we are labeling it. So we are adding text into the mixture because we see pictures in our mind when we tell stories. So and that's really important when we go to that. So I totally get what you're saying and why it can go even further when we're looking on upper education and even college level. I'm really interested to hear about your books. So one of the questions that I have for you, how does your book Mightier Than the Sword connect with your work, and how did you come up to write this book?
So it started with the work I did with kids. So I was always using what I call mentor texts. So I was taking books out of the library. Like I don't know if you know Richard Wright. He was a Black writer who wrote like 4,000 haiku poems, and someone put them together in a little picture book. So I would take that to the library, show the kids, show them his picture. Of course, if every time I brought them a picture of a Black man, they would think it was Martin Luther King Jr. And I'd say, no, 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 this is Richard Wright, or this is so and so. So it's nice for them to be able to see the pictures of the different authors. So I bring them all these books, and we have a great library system, and I love that. But I felt like I wanted one single book that would have the stories of all kinds of people. And I had this vision that the people I wrote about in the book would not just be traditional writers like Audre Lorde, who wrote stories and poems, or Octavia Butler, who wrote science fiction. I wanted people who wrote like computer code or laws. Like Patsy Mink. I wanted people who did all sorts of writings. Once when I was at the library, I had a boy come up to me and say, yeah, I don't need to be at your writing table. And And I said, why? And he said, well, I'm going to be a police officer. I won't have to write a word in my job. And I laughed at him, and not at him. I laughed and I said, I think police officers actually write quite a bit. And so we talked about like what I asked him, what do you imagine a police officer might have to write? And so we talked about various things. And so I wanted my book to reflect some of that diversity. And so when I wrote the book, I put in a lot of different kinds of people. And then every time there's a story about a person, like Anne Frank, then there's some other sidebars that tell stories about people like her, either from her area or who also wrote journals. And then there's a writing exercise that kids can do. And sometimes there's a kind of a bonus exercise, like something that they can draw or create. So in one exercise, they get to create like a saying and put it on a t-shirt, or create a comic. But other exercises are more, like they get to write their own Declaration of Independence. If you were to declare your independence, what would you write about? And so I feel like it's a great resource for both teachers and young people. So teachers can take it and just use any chapter as a starting point for a lesson. And they've got all the things that they need in it. And then a young person can, read whatever's interesting to them and then work through the essay, the writing prompts as they're interested. I know that um, as what I've experienced with young people is that they sometimes like to kind of follow their interests rather than go from beginning to end. And that's how I treat books as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's a creative way of, going through step.
Yeah.
Um, and what about so you mentioned that you're also founded a writing program for young people called Dream Keepers. So what kind of work do you do with them? Or is this related to the Mightier Than the Sword?
So it's all of the above. So we do a lot of the stuff that I've talked about with Mightier Than the Sword. Because I'm often at the library, I'm often incorporating books, things that are going on in the community and artists. Because most of the kids are more likely to come if there's some sort of art involved in the work we're doing. So for Valentine's Day, I was at a library and I had a bunch of Yayoi Kusama books and we did Yayoi Kusama hearts. So she's the one that does the big polka dots in all of her work or in a lot of her work. So we made a lot of polka dots and it was great fun because the young people I had only spoke Spanish and I don't speak very much Spanish. So they were trying to teach me how to say polka dot in Spanish, which was great. So we had a little multicultural language lesson going on, and we had a great time. Um, my goal with Dream Keepers is to first of all get kids thinking creatively. So to kind of combine some sort of art and writing so that they're smushing up a couple of different ideas in their head. And the second thing is to expose them to artists and writers, and the third thing is to just give them a good creative experience. My job is not to correct them. I do like to do a little teaching and education during it, but my goal is to really have them have fun so that they want to come back and do more of it. And in the past, I've had groups that have come weekly for a number of weeks, and with them, I'm able to do deeper work, and we create things that we then, workshop with each other, and develop that they can read in the
So
community.
I'm gonna take you back in time to think
Yes.
about woohoo, time machine. Back in time and think about I don't know, few young students that you were like, oh my gosh, this kid um has so much in them and that you learn so much from them, because I believe that in the line of our work and also, for the parents who listen, we learn so much from our kids. Um, and that's beautiful and gift that we have.
Yeah.
So that would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, so my very first group of young people, boy, about 20 years ago now, were just amazing. They were very great about being there every single week. And I had one girl named Deanna who had a special gift for writing. She was a good journaler, and so, she would always but she and her two sisters, were there together, and they were always able to kind of connect the writing both to their own community experience and to their emotional life, which I think is a really hard thing to do. Um, they were teenagers at the time, and I think teenagers maybe do it better than adults because we don't necessarily want to let our feelings show. But they did a very good job of that, and I was always impressed by that and tried to follow that in my writing. I watched them all, grow up. They're all parents now.
Mhm.
Um, and Deanna has a son with some had some lead poisoning. And so
Hmm.
she and her son wrote a book together about his experience. And they self-published it. And I was amazed watching how they did this together, how they created it. They self-published it. She's become an advocate for lead poisoning in the community. So she went all the way to the White House and talked to Kamala Harris about her experience and handed her a copy of her book, which was just so inspiring. And I had nothing to do with that book process. So it was amazing for me to see how she carried this practice of writing into her adult life and into her advocacy and as she worked with her own son. That was just such a delight for me to see her do that. And what was great is that I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't there saying you have to do this. She must have remembered our time together. She was so connected to her own creative spirit, um, and her own calling to be a writer, that she was able to do this on her own, and I'm so impressed by that.
It's very empowering.
Yes. Yes, I
And
and I love it. That's the goal, is that the kids go out and do their own thing without me. Um,
mhm. We talk a lot about voice. And sometimes, when you go to the academic, or I can only tell you that when I write report, I cannot put my voice there. Where like there are I'm kind of bummed because I do enjoy sometimes putting my voice in there. But some things are really, really flat. And for the sake of the flatness, I don't know why. Um, how do you empower teachers to help? Like, what the tips you can give to teachers to help
mhm.
students to develop their voice in the very limited time that they have in the classroom?
Yeah, voice is really hard, and I think it's really hard for the reason that teachers have to teach to standards, and so they want the young people to follow the standards and be able to kind of present these essays that kind of sound like they're supposed to sound, and that works directly in opposition to voice. Because voice, everybody has it. It's your natural way of expressing yourself. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be shaped. It does. But so I think that if teachers can encourage young people to do some journaling every day in class, on personal things that they're never going to read, just to get them kind of practicing their voice. It's a little bit like doing your scales as an instrumentalist or as a piano player. Um, Writing about things that you're passionate about help young people develop their voice. And then when they're working on their essays in class, I encourage teachers to loosen some of the constraints from here and there, and really encourage young people to kind of be a little more voicey because I think we hold them back, because voicey can sometimes mean that the grammar's not quite polished or not quite American English or, whatever style manual you're going with. And so I encourage teachers to kind of just encourage that voice, hold back the corrections, at least in the first few drafts. And then talk about with the young people if they can. Time is such a difficult thing with working with kids, but talk about like how can we make this sound like a regular sentence, but also retain your voice. What would help us do this? And this is especially, I think it's especially hard with students who struggle with their writing because they
Mhm.
don't, they can barely get anything on the paper, let alone get something with their voice. So sometimes I think that if we can get kids to dictate to us, and we can type it in, or they can dictate it into their computer, um, that can help them kind of hear the difference between just phoning it in and their actual voice. I think I mean, I just wrote about voice for my new book, and it was a really hard chapter to write. Um, I think it's a really hard thing for adult literary novelists to articulate, let alone for young people to get a hold of. Do you know what I mean? It's so complicated. But kids already have it. And I think kids have voice stronger than any of us do. Because they haven't had it beaten out of them yet. And by beaten out of them, I mean the way we correct kids so strongly. And sometimes I would see what my young people would be writing, and I could see the problems with it, but I love the voice so much. I didn't want to correct. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to like change it. Because their voices were so strong before I put the grammatical stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking even my process, with writing my thesis. Um, well, I did have more flexibility with putting some of my voice in there, but still it had to be academic language.
Hmm.
And but it's not creative writing, it's a research, and there is a place for that too.
There's definitely a voice of a research voice. I've worked with a lot of PhD, masters and PhD students, and um, it's part of the style of the academy. So it's hard to get around that.
Well, you mentioned you worked with PhD, so this we're kind of going through moving to that idea of adults. And so what kind of work do you do with adults?
So mostly it's book coaching. So it's either people who are in their PhD program and they need to finish a dissertation, or it's people who finish their PhDs and they need to start publishing, or simply other experts, therapists, psychologists, teachers, people who want to write books to support their students or clients. And so a lot of them struggle with the basic things that we all struggle with, thinking about they know all this stuff. How are they going to put it in a container um,
Yeah,
that's gonna
organization.
that's gonna work with their readers? So how are they going to organize it? And I've been a big fan of the book How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. It's a book by a therapist written for her clients who are neurodiverse, many who have ADHD, and she has gone through the book and bolded the sentences she feels like everybody needs to read to just get to the end. And I often use that as an example for them. Not that they have to do that with their book, but that shows how one writer is really thinking about her readers as she's creating her book. And so a lot of the people I work with, it's just a matter of thinking aloud with me. How do I make this book work for my readers? I can't talk to them the way I talk to my peers. I can't talk to them the way I would talk to them if I were writing an academic paper. So how am I going to write to them? And then once we have that kind of book structure down and their voice, it's a matter of just structuring their time so that they can get their work done. Because almost everybody I work with is working full time, and trying to manage their writing time. And if they're not working full time, then they don't have the structure. So they need to find a way to structure their time, to get their work done.
So what is your tip?
What are some
So
tips for them?
yeah, for those who cannot work with a writing coach, for example.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I think is really helpful, is if you can stack your writing with something else you do. It's called habit stacking. Before that became a term, I called it piggybacking. So you piggyback something you do every day with your writing, your morning coffee. I like to write right after I've eaten breakfast, but before I've looked at social media or my email, because once you enter, you allow a lot of your tasks to come into your brain. That spaciousness of thought is gone. So if you can stack your writing time with something else in your life, if that morning writing time isn't good for you, then I encourage people to take an afternoon cup of tea and do their writing then, because then a lot of the work of the day is done. Sometimes they're a little tired, they can relax a little. Sometimes the research says when you're a little more relaxed, you're a little more creative. When you're more tired, you're a little more creative. So that's another thing that helps. Something that some people do if they can't fit it into their daily life is that they have writing Saturdays or a writing date on Friday afternoon, and they go to a cafe with a colleague and they do body doubling, and they just write together. They don't talk, but they have a cup of tea and they work. And libraries are great places for that because a lot of people are doing their work in the library. So you can come to their one of their bars or one of their tables and just plug in your laptop and get going. Um, does that help? Is that a good start? Or are there any other things that would be helpful to know?
I think it's a good start. I'm just thinking like, hmm. But it's true for like even if you don't need to write a book, right? If you need to do something that you need to do for work, for example, but you need to change your environment because sometimes the
Yeah.
environment doesn't work for you. Some of us, work from home. I mean, and you just need to get out, and do something somewhere else. Even sit at your backyard if it's not snow on you. We don't have snow on you right now. We're recording this podcast while there is a snowstorm in New York, so and East Coast. So our thoughts for them. So don't go outside right now. But I don't know, sit on the carpet. I like to do stuff with my dog next to me. So it's
Yeah.
like finding the environment that work for you and make the environment work for you. You don't have to sit by the desk to do that.
I think that's a great idea. And the other thing that can help is changing from computer to pen and paper. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people write their best stuff. And the way to work up to working on a book is to start by writing in your journal and then to move into writing short things and then, blog posts or even pieces on LinkedIn or Substack. And then as you feel more confident, those things can be put together into a book. But I like to take my journal and my pen over to my cozy chair with a blanket when it's so cold, and write there.
Yeah, we all have our own little things that, just find something that brings you joy and you
Yes,
can write through, write through it.
right through
Pretty
it.
good.
Yes.
All right, before we finish up, is there anything else that you feel like, okay, this is a great takeaway for you to take with you? And we will definitely put links for your books in the description. So I'm excited about that as well. Any takeaway for our listeners?
So if you want to write a book, I would encourage all of you to just be on the lookout for the book you want to write. So take a look, and when you fall in love with a book, the format, the topic, the style, just put it on a little shelf. And maybe in a couple of years, you'll have a whole shelf full of books you love. And that will give you an idea of what you want to write. But for now, it's enough to just read, to nourish yourself and to nurture your own creativity.
Wow, I could not even summarize it better. I can only tell you that I'm working on a book. And you guys, I'm not a great writer. I mean, I have language barriers. I'm writing in English, which is not my mother language. And keep an eye out for my Ollie in the National Parks book, because we decided to, it's something that I work with my son. It's super fun. We work on a book about our dog from the dog point of view, like
Nice.
from his voice, and going through the national parks because it's something we do as families. And which lizard he tried to catch, and kind of think about his character, what he will do, right? His personality. So this is a work in progress,
Oh, that's
and
fun.
I think it's gonna be super fun. I am enjoying doing this with my son. I have to say, this is a quality time for us.
Yes, what a great idea. And what a great adventure to have all these experiences with your son and your dog and the parks.
Oh yeah, super fun. Yeah, we need to have more of that, like exploring in nature. And yeah,
Yes.
journal in nature. Grab your journal.
Grab your journal and take notes. Who knows what the dog's going to do next time?
It's a good one. We never know.
We don't.
With that note, thank you. Thank you,
Thank,
Rochelle.
thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. It was a fantastic episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Apple Podcast and on Spotify. Take care. Bye bye.